Hello everyone, this is John Lubers again, and today we're going to talk about the legal aspects of functional behavioral assessment. Some of the federal law and some of the state law that gives rise to the need for functional behavioral assessment as well as functional analysis assessment. We'll also talk a little bit about positive behavior support plans as well as positive behavior intervention plans. So, as you know, what drives special education and federally is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA. So, to review again, the situations in which a functional behavioral assessment would be necessary and are articulated in IDEA 2004 are one, situations where discipline is involved, or we have a context or a situation of discipline regarding a student in special education or that has an individual education plan. Two, for students with IEPs that have behavioral issues that interfere with accessing the curriculum. So anything that they may do that prevents them from participating in the course, accessing the curriculum, anything of that nature. And there's a myriad of potential possibilities for what that would be. Anytime we're involved in a manifestation determination for a student with disabilities or a student with identified as special education with an IEP. And then last, anytime we have behavioral challenges for a student in the general ed setting that may in fact better be served in the special ed setting. That is, they've not yet been identified, but upon assessment would then qualify for special education. So, secondly, now let's talk about the Hughes Bill. And again, this pertains to California only. So, school psychologists that are practicing school psychology in California only. If you practice in Arizona or Washington or Florida, this is really not pertinent for you. However, let's discuss it anyways because it will be best practices. So the Hughes Bill essentially says that for students with on IEPs in special education that have severe problem behavior, a functional analysis assessment is required. And that's specified out in Hughes Bill, Assembly Bill 2586, AB 2586. Specifically, what constitutes a serious behavior problem could be self-injurious behavior, assaultive behavior, property destruction, and other pervasive maladaptive behaviors that the general, regular, typical educational practices and the previous behavior strategies have been unsuccessful in addressing. So let's just talk about that a little bit more. Self-injurious behavior is essentially if students are doing things to harm themselves, if they have behaviors such as head banging, eye poking, cutting, or any type of behavior that would cause injury to themselves. Assaultive behavior, any extreme form of physical aggression where they're assaulting staff or fellow students. Property destruction, where they're destroying property, could be in class, on campus. And then other problem behaviors or issues that have not been successfully dealt with general educational approaches and or a functional behavioral assessment. Or generally what we mean by this is if you've not been successful addressing it with less than functional analysis, then it may be time to do a functional analysis assessment. Also, let's talk a little bit about positive behavior support plans. Positive behavior support plans stem from functional behavioral assessments. They're necessary. It's necessary to conduct a functional behavioral assessment to determine what behavioral function is, to determine antecedents, and to determine consequences. Once we've determined that information, then we can develop a positive behavior support plan. And that plan will be to teach the student a functionally equivalent replacement behavior And we'll talk more in depth about what a functionally equivalent, what a function is and what a functionally equivalent replacement behavior is in later podcasts as well as in class. We'll talk about that. But that's what a functional behavioral assessment will develop. That it will develop a antecedent strategy to teach that behavior. It'll develop prompting strategies, contexts, and consequent interventions to teach those behaviors, that replacement behavior, to a student with disabilities. Also, let's talk a little bit about positive behavior intervention plans. And that language or that terminology is generally more associated with the Hughes Bill or the Assembly Bill 2586 and functional analysis assessments. And it's similar conceptually to a functional behavioral or to a positive behavior support plan, and which also stems from an assessment. However, it is based on the functional analysis assessment rather than the functional behavioral assessment. It also has the same components. It has an antecedent analysis. It determines or has a hypothesis of behavioral function, looks at the consequences involved for the problem behavior. And the one thing that differs from a positive behavior support plan and the information that's derived from a functional behavioral assessment is that you actually test out the hypotheses for the function of the behavior. So we'll construct analog or analog situations in the school setting that will be able to test these functional hypotheses. And again, we'll talk more about behavioral function in the future.